It's October 3rd, 2019, and we're in Madison, Wisconsin, right before the National Dairy Shrine Awards Banquet, and it's my great pleasure to be with Dr. Ken Butcher, a pioneer this year. Ken, quite an honor, isn't it?
It sure is. It's just really special to me, especially when I look at all the people that have been awarded the Pioneer over the years, and so many of them have been my mentors or, people well known in the dairy industry, especially in my area of genetics, like C.R. Henderson, and of course Dr. Legates was my major professor, and he's a pioneer. And Ben McDaniel has been a guest of honor. Ben was kind of my mentor in graduate school because he came a little bit before me and helped me get along to get through graduate school. So it's real special to me.
Well, that's a common theme with a lot of the people who we award Hall of Fame honors, is that everybody has mentors and they're important.
Yeah.
But everybody has a beginning as well. So
Yeah.
why don't you talk a little bit about growing up and what got you involved in that dairy industry?
Well, I was born in Ontario, Canada, near London, Ontario, in a little village of Imbro. And my parents were dairy farmers. And I was there until I was 11 years old. My father made a trip to South Carolina, a kind of vacation. And he liked the idea that he wouldn't have to have the cattle in the winter housed in the stables. So he made the bold move of moving from there to Sumter, South Carolina. And he got in the dairy business down there. And so he stayed in the dairy business there, and then he later moved from Sumter down to Holly Hill. That's where I went to high school. And then I went to college at Clemson. And I graduated from Clemson. And when I was in college, he sold his farm in South Carolina and he moved down to Southwest Georgia. And that's where I met my wife, Sue. And she lived in Leesburg. That was the town where he moved to. When I was in college, my major professor, Professor Goodale, encouraged me to go to graduate school, and he wanted me to go to NC State and recommended Dr. Legates as my major professor there. And so after I spent 6 months in the military, because I had the draft back then, and I didn't want to get drafted, then I went to graduate school at NC State. And I got my master's degree, and I got the idea, well, maybe I wanted to dairy farm. So I moved back to Leesburg with my brother, and we ran a dairy for 3 years and worked closely with the DHIA there. And the folks from NC State contacted our extension dairyman in Georgia and said, would Ken be interested in taking a position at Dairy Records in Raleigh? And that was really exciting to me because I was always impressed with the records center there. And so I got the position there as the extension specialist and in charge of the software development area.
DRMS, as we know it today, you were on the ground floor and all that, and so you've seen the changes in the DHI industry from the very beginning. Yeah. Why don't you explain how you started in that area, and what are some of the tasks that you were doing at that time?
Well, back then there was 15 dairy record centers in the country, and ours was called the Southern Regional Dairy Record Center. And Marvin Singer was the founding father of that, and he had the idea that because dairy was not big in the Southeast, that he'd have to work together with other states in order to have a viable center there. And so when I went to work there, we were in the throngs of a change in our software, where we added a lot of new information. We had a heifer calf page and more management, more herd summary, and more than the traditional single sheet DHIA that was there for many years when we started with computerized records. And so we had one thing that we did was we had a lot of competition then, and Bliss Crandall was one of the leaders in computerization of records. And so we had big herds in the Southeast, and we knew in order to keep those herds, we had to innovate and do a lot of the things that Bliss had done in the West. So we began to innovate and add new options to the record system.
So why don't you explain a little bit of the collaboration you do with others in the industry, but actually you probably did a lot of committee meetings with dairymen to actually find out what they want as well.
That's right. And we had our organization was around the what's now known as affiliates. We had each southern state was had its own DHIA, and they had most at that time the extension dairyman was kind of the leader of DHIA. So we had an annual meeting. We got together and we discussed things that we could add to the program that would help them. And so I worked very closely with the extension dairyman, and of course traveled to the states when we had meetings with the DHI technicians, and tried to gather what I could of new information that would help the farmers with their records.
Well, you've been one of the leaders of getting into this computer age, as we called it then. Now it's even past that, but you developed something to do with actually getting that computer information back to the dairymen, didn't you?
Well, we knew that we had to get, because of the big herds, we had to get information to them on a daily basis rather than once a month. So we developed a telecommunications protocol that they could have a terminal at the dairy and communicate with our computer in Raleigh. And we called that, at that time we called it DART, Direct Access to Records by Telephone. And Dr. Webb at the University of Florida was one of the leaders in getting that going, because we had big herds in Florida that needed that kind of information. And then later on, as the PC revolution came about, we transferred those software programs to PCs, and we have what they now call PC DART, which is a computer on the farm. And then also we had used that same technology to have the technicians enter the data on the farm into a computer and send it to Raleigh. And we had the first programs where the lab data was transmitted directly. So they'd test the herd, enter the data into their computer, send it to Raleigh, then they'd send the samples to the lab. The lab would telecommunicate with us, and that way we were able to cut down the turnaround time by a significant amount because of that technology.
Well, did you ever think about when you first started and you were getting a page of paper and mailing it to somebody that you'd ever get to this computer age? Where
and if you look back, Dave, about the way we were communicating then, it's 300 and 1200 baud versus what is available today is just amazing. The technology change has gone on in the last 15 to 20 years in the computer industry.
And now with robotics, you can even do it by quarter, you know, not just by a cow, you know.
That's right, yeah. And we also had a challenge there when the computerized milking systems came into being. At that time, some of the people in the industry said, well, we're going to do away with DHIA. So we had to work closely with them, and that's something they do now in Raleigh, is work very closely with the milking machine manufacturers in exchanging information so that we can continue to keep our record system and going into to the national database on our sour cow evaluations.
Well, you've truly been a pioneer in this area, but the area now that's gaining importance is just what you've alluded to, is the data that's captured and what use that data can be.
Mm-hmm. It certainly is, and I think the expansion, I mean, when we started, you just got information on milk and fat and protein production, and then later cell count information came into the picture, but now you got reproductive information, and even now we've got information on the health and treatments on the cows, and a lot of that information we are able to exchange with the National Sour Evaluation System and improve. And of course, genomics is a tremendous change in our industry that we've seen over the last 10 years.
Well, we've talked a lot about DHIA, but you also did some research besides that too, right?
Yeah. Well, when I was started Dairy Records, I was working with software development, but also doing research with the records, and published some papers on effect of the length of the dry period and dam genetics involvement with the record system and so on.
Fantastic. Mm-hmm. In terms of when you started out, did you ever dream that DRMS would grow from where you were to what it is today?
Well, no, I didn't. But we realized, I think Glenn Wall was our director when I came there, and Glenn was realizing that we had to expand, that we could see that there was not going to continue to be 15 dairy record centers. We had to expand our program. So he was very active in trying to solicit new business, and as opportunities came along, and one of the key things I think was when we made the merger between our center and the one at Ames. And well, I worked closely with Greg Pallas, and we were able to consolidate our efforts. And then later on, we had additions from Minnesota and Dairy One, which the expansion helped our system be much more efficient.
Well, you've had a great career. You've had a lot to do in the dairy industry, but you probably also want to talk a little bit about your family.
I do. I have 2 sons, David and Chris, and their wives, and 5 grandchildren, and my wonderful wife, Sue. And she's been my rock. She's stood by me. We've been married 55 years now. And I met her when I was in college, and my family moved to Georgia and going down there on the holidays. And, we got married, and that's really a big part of my life is my family.
Yeah, I think doing these interviews for a while, you find out that people have mentors, they have a family, and that makes them successful.
Yeah, we hope so.
And Ken, you've been very successful.
Well,
congratulations
thank you very much,
on being
Dave.
a National Dairy Shrine Pioneer.
I'm really proud and honored to get that award.